My dad told me to forgive the sister who slept with my husband, so I told him to shut the hell up. She betrayed me. He cheated, and my own father took their side. I snapped, and I don't regret a word. Then I exposed the whole rotten truth and walked out with my dignity intact. This one gets brutal. I'm sorry, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't mean to do it. Her father's eyes searched hers, looking for the little girl he knew, the one who always sought his approval and loved him unconditionally. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She was a woman who'd had her heart shattered by the two people she'd trusted most. Dad, she began, her voice firm despite the ache in her chest, you don't get to tell me how to feel. You don't get to decide what's right for me after everything you've done. Her father's face fell, his expression a mix of surprise and disappointment. He'd always seen himself as the rock of the family, the one who held everyone together. Her accusation felt like a punch to the gut, but she didn't stop there. You didn't just cheat on Mom, she said, her voice rising. You broke her heart, over and over again. And what did we do? We picked up the pieces. We pretended like everything was fine. And now you're asking me to do the same? Her words hung in the air, echoing off the walls of the room she'd once felt so safe in. The silence was deafening. The clock ticked away the seconds as she waited for a response, her heart racing with the anticipation of finally being heard. Her father took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. For the first time, she saw a flicker of understanding in his gaze. I know you're hurt, he said, his voice low and measured. And I'm not saying it's right, but family is important. Family? She scoffed. Is that what you call it when you hurt the people who love you the most? Because if it is, then maybe I don't want to be a part of this family anymore. The tension grew as they stood there, locked in a standoff of wills. Her mother hovered in the doorway, her own pain etched on her face, unsure of whether to intervene or let the moment pass. Finally, her father spoke again, his tone softer. You're right, I wasn't the best husband, but I'm still your father, and I want to help you. Her mother took a tentative step into the room, her eyes pleading. Your sister and your ex-husband made mistakes, she said. But maybe, just maybe, they deserve a chance to explain themselves, to make it right. The words felt like knives, twisting in her stomach. She knew her mother meant well, but she couldn't fathom the idea of letting them back into her life, not after what they'd done. She'd built a fortress around her heart, and the thought of letting them back in was terrifying. I don't know if I can do that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'll think about it. It was the closest she could come to forgiveness, for now. As she turned to leave the room, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't be the one to carry the burden of their betrayal any longer. The silence that followed was the first step in reclaiming her voice, her life, and her truth. In the days that followed, she threw herself into work, using the chaos of deadlines and office politics as a distraction from the turmoil at home. It was easier to hide in the maze of cubicles than to face the echoes of her shattered marriage. Her colleagues noticed a change in her, a newfound steel in her spine, and they rallied around her, offering support in quiet, unspoken ways. One evening, as she was leaving the office, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from her sister, the first in weeks. She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the delete button. But curiosity got the better of her. I know you hate me, it read. And I don't blame you. I just want to say that I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I'm going to therapy to understand why I did what I did. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Her sister's words were like a pebble thrown into a still pond, sending ripples of doubt through her anger. Was forgiveness really the answer? Or was it just another way of burying the pain? As she drove home, the city lights blurring into streaks of color outside her car window, she thought about the bed she used to share with her ex-husband. The emptiness he'd texted about was a mirror to her own, a void that no apology could fill. But was she ready to let go of the anger that kept her afloat? Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, a gentle reminder that everyone deserves a chance to atone. But was she ready to hear their explanations? To face the raw, unfiltered truth of why they'd done this to her? The house was dark when she pulled into the driveway, a stark contrast to the tumult inside her. She sat in the car, the engine idling, and took a deep breath. The air was cool and crisp, hinting at the coming fall. It felt like a symbol of the change she knew she needed to make. With a newfound determination, she turned off the car and stepped into the quiet night. As she approached the front door, she knew that she couldn't keep running from her emotions. The time had come to face the storm head-on and decide who she wanted to be when the dust settled. The door creaked open, and she stepped over the threshold, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. The house was silent, but she could almost hear the whispers of the past, the echoes of laughter and love that had been replaced by betrayal. Taking one last deep breath, she turned on the lights and began to walk towards her old life, ready to either rebuild or walk away. The story of her future was still unwritten, and she was the only one who could decide how it would unfold. The next day, she went for a run, her thoughts racing faster than her feet. The cool air was refreshing, but it couldn't chase away the memories that haunted her. As she rounded the corner to her street, she saw a figure standing by her mailbox. It was him, her ex-husband, looking lost and defeated. "What do you want?" she called out, her voice a mix of anger and fear. He turned, his eyes red and puffy. For a moment, she saw the man she'd once loved, not the monster who'd betrayed her. "I just wanted to talk," he said, his voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve it, but I can't stop thinking about you." Her instinct was to turn and run, to leave him in the dust like he'd left her heart. But something held her back. Maybe it was the desperation in his eyes, or the quiet acceptance that she saw in his slumped shoulders. She approached slowly, her guard up. They talked for what felt like hours, their words a jumbled mess of pain and regret. And then, out of the blue, he confessed something she never saw coming. He'd been dealing with his own demons, a secret struggle that had fueled his infidelity. As he spoke, she felt a strange shift, the anger giving way to something she hadn't expected, understanding. The revelation didn't excuse his actions, but it did offer a glimpse into the torment he'd been living with. And as they stood there, two broken souls in the early dawn, they realized they weren't so different after all. Both had been shaped by the same toxic patterns, the same twisted view of love and loyalty. Their shared pain became a bridge between them, a path to a new kind of connection. They decided to walk this path together, not as lovers, but as two people who'd been hurt by the same dark currents that ran through their family. They'd face their past, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to heal together. The road ahead was long and fraught with obstacles, but as they stepped forward side by side, she felt a flicker of hope. The anger that had consumed her was now a beacon of strength, guiding her towards a future where she could finally be free of the shackles of their shared history. The bond they formed was bittersweet, but it was real, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As they continued their journey, she knew that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. It was a choice to move forward, to learn from the past without letting it define her. And in the quiet moments when she felt the anger bubbling up again, she'd remember their alliance, and the promise they'd made to each other, to break the cycle and become the people they were meant to be. One evening, while out with friends, she bumped into an old flame, Jack. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and she felt a jolt of something she hadn't felt in a long time: desire. They talked, and as the night grew later, she found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The conversation flowed easily, and she couldn't help but feel a spark rekindling between them. Jack had always been the one that got away, the one who'd treated her right, who'd made her feel seen and loved. As they said their goodbyes, he took her hand and said, "We should do this again." She nodded, her heart racing with the possibility of a fresh start. Over the next few weeks, she saw Jack more and more. They'd go out for dinner, take walks in the park, and share stories about their lives since they'd last seen each other. It was easy, comfortable, and free from the heavy weight of her past. With every date, she felt herself falling deeper, the anger towards her ex-husband and sister slowly giving way to something else: happiness. But the ghosts of her past weren't so easily banished. One night, as she lay in bed, her ex-husband's texts popped up again, the words "I miss you" staring at her from the screen. It was a stark reminder of the pain she'd endured, and the choice she had to make. Was it possible to forgive and move on? Or was she destined to be trapped in the shadow of their betrayal forever? The decision didn't come to her overnight. It was a battle she waged within herself, each day bringing new insights and emotions. But as she grew closer to Jack, she realized that she had to confront her ex-husband and her sister, not to seek their forgiveness, but to finally lay her own anger to rest. It was the only way she could truly embrace the love that was blossoming before her. The meetings were tense, filled with accusations and tears, but they were also cathartic. She didn't expect apologies to wipe away the hurt, but she did find a sense of closure in the raw honesty of their exchanges. And as she looked into her sister's eyes, she saw the woman she'd once loved, the person she could still love, if she allowed herself to. The healing was a slow, painful process, but with each step she took, she felt lighter, stronger. And as she leaned into Jack's embrace, she knew that she'd made the right choice: to forgive, to move on, and to let love in again. The future was uncertain, but she was ready to face it, hand in hand with the man who'd shown her that happiness wasn't just a fleeting memory, it was a possibility she could hold on to, if she had the courage to fight for it. One day, she received a mysterious email from an anonymous sender. It contained details about a family therapy session that had been scheduled without her knowledge. Her heart raced as she read the email, her mind swirling with emotions. Could this be a twisted joke? Or was it a genuine attempt at making amends? Against her better judgment, she decided to go. The office was warm and inviting, the therapist's voice soothing as she led them through the door. There they were, her father and sister, sitting side by side, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen them. Their eyes met, and she saw the raw hope in their expressions. The session was intense, a roller coaster of accusations and apologies. Her sister spoke of her own pain, her fear of losing the one person she'd always looked up to. Her father talked of his past indiscretions, of his regret, and his desire to be a better man, not just for her, but for their entire family. They'd come together, seeking redemption, hoping to mend the fractured bonds that had once held them so tightly. The words flowed like a dam breaking, and she found herself speaking more openly than she ever had before. She didn't hold back, sharing her anger, her hurt, and her fear, but she also spoke of her love for them, of her wish to move past the pain. It was a raw, unfiltered conversation that left them all feeling exposed, but also oddly relieved. As the session came to a close, she looked at them, really looked, and saw the remorse etched into their faces. And for the first time in months, she felt something other than anger. It was a whisper of forgiveness, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could all find a way to heal together. The weeks that followed were a blur of tears and laughter, of late-night phone calls and heart-to-hearts. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when she wanted to walk away, but she held on to the promise she'd made to herself, to break the cycle. And as they worked through their pain, she saw glimpses of the family she'd once known, the one she'd hoped to build her own life around. Jack was there for her every step of the way, his patience and understanding a balm to her soul. He didn't push her, didn't ask for more than she could give. He just loved her, through the storms and the silence, the anger and the healing. One sunny afternoon, as they sat on the porch of her childhood home, she knew she'd reached a turning point. Her father and sister sat on the lawn, awkwardly playing catch with a frisbee. They'd come a long way, all of them, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest as she watched them. "Jack," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "I want to tell you something." He looked at her, his eyes full of love and concern. "I think I'm ready to forgive them," she said, her voice shaky. "I can't change what happened, but I can choose not to let it define me anymore." Jack took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're so strong," he said, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'm proud of you." And with that, she took a deep breath and stepped off the porch, ready to face the future, ready to forgive, ready to live. At the family gathering, she stood tall, her voice unsteady but determined. She told them all, the aunts, uncles, cousins, how she'd felt when she discovered the betrayal, how it had torn her heart in two, how she'd felt so alone. Her words were a knife, cutting through the tension that had hung in the air for months, exposing the raw wound beneath. Her sister and ex-husband sat at the table, heads bowed, unable to meet her gaze. The room was silent, the only sound the occasional sniffle from her mother. She spoke of the pain her father had caused, not just her, but the entire family, of how his actions had set a toxic precedent that she'd sworn never to follow. She didn't ask for pity, she demanded understanding. And as she spoke, she watched the faces of her relatives change, the realization dawning that maybe, just maybe, they'd been wrong to be so quick to judge her. Her words were a storm, a catharsis that washed over them all, and when she finished, she waited, her heart pounding in her chest. Would they cast her out? Would they condemn her for speaking her truth? Or would they finally see her for the strong, resilient woman she'd become? The first to speak was her grandmother, her voice trembling with age and emotion. "You're right," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We've all made mistakes, but it's time we held ourselves accountable. It's time we start healing." One by one, others spoke up, sharing their own stories of hurt and regret. The weight of their collective pain was palpable, but so too was the strength that came from finally acknowledging it. They talked into the night, the air thick with the scent of candles and the promise of change. It was a tumultuous journey that lay ahead, filled with therapy sessions and uncomfortable conversations. There were moments of anger and frustration, when old wounds felt fresh, but there were also moments of tenderness, when they all reached out to each other, offering comfort and understanding. But through it all, she remained steadfast. She didn't forgive for them, she forgave for herself. And as she watched her family begin to mend, she knew she'd made the right choice. The love she'd felt for them, the bond that had been stretched so thin, grew stronger with every step they took towards healing. And Jack? He was her rock, her constant, her love. With every shared smile and every whispered "I'm here," she felt their future unfolding before her. A future filled with hope, with the possibility of a love that didn't come with the shackles of the past. The night ended with hugs that lingered longer than usual, with promises to do better. As she looked around the room, She knew that the family she had was flawed, but it was hers, and it was worth fighting for. The storm had passed, and in its wake, there was a newfound peace, a chance for growth. And so, she stood there, her heart full and her eyes dry, ready to take on the next chapter. It was a new dawn, a chance to rewrite their story, to break free from the patterns of the past. And as she took Jack's hand, she knew that she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they'd navigate the choppy waters of forgiveness and find their way to a place where love could truly heal all wounds.